Samira stepped off the bus into a Lithuanian blizzard with a sewing needle, a bent tea strainer, and one shoebox of camp scraps. The wind sliced through her borrowed coat so sharply it felt like the border itself had followed her into the snow. Ahead stood a village white, silent, and suspicious. She rented a narrow room above a shuttered shop where the window leaked ice flowers onto the mattress every night. In the market square, she watched bakers yank pale loaves from the oven and wrap them fast before winter stole the warmth. The bakery owner counted fuel coins with cracked red hands because heating the ovens long enough to save each batch meant losing money. Samira understood that arithmetic instantly because hunger always teaches faster than language lessons, and cold keeps a harsher ledger. She had no diploma anyone recognized, no fluent Lithuanian, and no name the officials pronounced the same way twice. What she had were camp habits: save every scrap, study every system, and never confuse shame with survival. At night, she emptied the shoebox onto the blanket like treasure and sorted each remnant by thickness, weave, and memory. There were tent patches, flour sacks, aid labels, bits of blanket binding, and one faded apron square smelling faintly of smoke. She touched the brass tea strainer and remembered women in the camp turning broken things into useful things before despair could claim them. The bakery workers burned their hands hauling trays because their gloves soaked through and froze by dawn. Samira asked for discarded mushroom-growing sacks from a nearby shed because their layered fabric trapped warmth better than the bakery rags. She washed the sacks in gray water, cut around mold scars, and stitched thick curved pockets by lamplight with the single needle. The first oven mitts looked ugly as patched boats, but they gripped hot trays without blistering skin or leaking winter inside. The baker tested them, blinked hard, and reached for another tray as if he had discovered fire all over again. He paid her in bread ends and a few coins, which she stacked carefully beside her immigration papers like seedlings. By the second week, every worker wanted a pair, and Samira started reinforcing seams with threads pulled from old grain bags. She could not yet ask for much, so she let usefulness speak first and let quality translate what her mouth could not. The village children noticed her rinsing sacks behind the bakery and began bringing her cast-offs in sleds like tiny smugglers of possibility. She traded mended mittens and simple patches for buttons, jars, and rumors about empty buildings nobody bothered to heat. One rumor stayed bright in her mind: abandoned greenhouses by the river, wrapped in cracked plastic and filled with frozen benches. She walked there at sunrise and found rows of transparent skeletons silvered with frost, glowing like stranded ships in a field. Most people saw failure in those shattered frames, but Samira saw trapped light, free volume, and walls already begging to become warmth. Near the salmon farm, heaps of discarded plastic sheeting fluttered blue and green against the snow like fish skin thrown by giants. Behind a closed public sauna, splintered benches leaned in a pile, stripped from the room where villagers once survived winters together. Samira measured every board with her hands, every panel with her steps, and every possibility against the fuel prices taped above the bakery register. She remembered camp kitchens lined with reflective foil, shared body heat, and improvised barriers that stretched one flame into a meal for many. Heat, she realized, did not only come from buying more fuel. Sometimes it came from refusing to waste what was already escaping. She patched the greenhouse cracks with salmon farm plastic, layered air gaps between sheets, and turned the tea strainer into a vent cover. She dragged the old sauna benches inside and rebuilt them into long, insulated platforms where people could sit shoulder to shoulder. She lined walls with flour sacks, stuffed with dry straw, creating rough panels that held warmth, the way cupped hands protect a match. The baker thought she was building nonsense until he stepped inside one finished section and watched his own breath stop showing. Together, they moved proofing racks, old trays, and a small second oven into the greenhouse warming room to test her gamble. Snow pressed against the outside plastic like a white ocean, while inside, the trapped heat rose soft and steady around the dough. The first morning, the loaves climbed higher, browned deeper, and stayed alive long enough for customers to smell them from the square. Fuel use dropped enough for the baker to stop flinching at every meter reading, and that changed his face before it changed his books. Soon, The warming room became more than a workaround because cold people kept drifting in with numb hands and lonely errands. An old widow came to thaw by the oven and ended up braiding twine around bread bags to strengthen the handles. Teenagers stacked wood scraps, swept melted slush, and learned that usefulness feels better than being seen as trouble. A mechanic repaired hinges for free after realizing fresh bread in winter mattered as much as any machine starting at dawn. Samira organized tasks on cardboard sketches because her grammar still stumbled, but clear pictures can move a village faster than polished speeches. She drew arrows for airflow, circles for workstations, and tiny loaves beside every job that turned effort into food. The system worked because she designed it around what people already had, not around tools, money, or permission they were still waiting for. Every leftover became inventory. Burlap became insulation, cracked trays became heat reflectors, and bent nails became hooks in a place built from yes. She also kept learning Lithuanian through labels, bus tickets, and bakery orders, stitching new words into her mouth the same way she stitched fabric. Instead of hiding mistakes, she carried a pocket notebook and wrote corrections immediately, turning embarrassment into a portable classroom. As winter deepened, the greenhouse bakery produced enough extra loaves to donate baskets to families choosing between heating and dinner. Children who once came for scraps began arriving for warm rolls, homework corners, and jobs wiping tables in the late afternoon light. The village stopped calling her the refugee girl in whispers and started calling her when pipes froze, zippers broke, or ideas needed rescuing. She had crossed continents carrying almost nothing, yet the smallest objects she saved had trained her to notice value where others saw debris. When spring finally thawed the roads, the greenhouse no longer looked abandoned, but busy, bright, and full of handprints against clear, repaired walls. A regional paper printed a photograph of steaming bread inside the old greenhouse, and nearby towns came asking how she beat the fuel bills. Samira showed them layered insulation, shared space, salvaged materials, and one ruthless principle: stop heating emptiness when you can design warmth around people. She explained that constraints can become blueprints if you inventory assets before you count your excuses. She taught bakers to test one corner before rebuilding everything, because small proof quiets doubt better than passionate promises ever can. She taught families to save useful scraps in labeled bins, because what looks worthless alone can solve a crisis when combined intelligently. She taught young workers to ask one practical question each day: what problem keeps hurting everyone that nobody has named clearly yet? Her own answer had been simple and brutal. Bread was dying in the cold before it could reach hungry hands. The profits from mitts, bread, and consulting stayed modest at first, but modest money handled carefully can still redraw a future. She leased the former shuttered shop beneath her freezing room and scraped paint from the windows until sunlight poured in again. The front became a cafe warm with yeast, black tea, and stories. The back held sewing tables for women needing work. Some were refugees, some were widows, some were teenagers, avoiding the trap of leaving because nobody had imagined a place for them. Samira hired them to make insulated mitts, repair coats, and package bread, paying on time because dignity cannot grow on gratitude alone. On opening night, snow fell in thick, quiet feathers while the new sign lit above the door with her chosen name. She stood in the square and watched that glow spread across the drifts like a promise stitched, tested, and finally strong enough to hold. She thought of every checkpoint, every wet tent, every official stare, and every hour spent salvaging warmth from places abandoned by luck. Success had not erased the past. It had rearranged its sharpest pieces into tools, shelter, and bread for other people. If her story carries anything useful into your life, let it be this hard, practical hope. Begin with what remains. Name the exact problem. Save every scrap of value, test a small solution fast, and let usefulness build trust before recognition arrives. When the world hands you cold, design a room that keeps one more person warm, then scale it until the whole town can breathe.